Their twin slapped and kicked me, but my son just smirked. They're kidding, just accept it. While my daughter-in-law smiled, you deserve it. I was 65 when I moved into my son's house in Tennessee. It was supposed to be temporary. I told myself it was only temporary because I trusted Edward's promise. That is what I told myself when I packed the last of my things into 2 old suitcases and boarded the bus from Memphis to Knoxville. Edward had said they needed help. Just until we find a better nanny, he promised. You know how hard it is these days. I wanted to believe him, wanted to think that family still meant something. I told myself it would be nice to wake up to children's laughter, to cook breakfast again, to be useful. But I was wrong. The house was beautiful, far larger than anything I had ever owned. Clara, my daughter-in-law, took pride in that. She liked to remind me, and anyone who would listen, that it was their achievement, not inherited luck. I didn't mind. I had come to help, not to compete. Every morning I woke up before sunrise, made breakfast, packed lunches, folded laundry, swept the floors, and prepared dinner before the twins returned from school. I didn't complain. I told myself this was love. At first, Isla and Liam were polite in the shallow way that children are when told to behave. They said thank you but never looked me in the eye. Over the months, their tone changed. You're too slow. Isla would snap when I couldn't reach the top shelf fast enough. You smell like old books, Liam once muttered, wrinkling his nose. I laughed it off because I didn't want to cause trouble. One Sunday afternoon, Clara was out shopping, Edward was watching a football game, and the twins were chasing each other around the living room. They had spilled juice on the rug, the one Clara had bought from some expensive store in Nashville. I knelt to clean it before it stained. You two need to calm down before someone gets hurt, I said quietly. Isla rolled her eyes. You're not the boss, she said. Mom says you just like pretending. Liam laughed. Yeah, Grandma the maid. I froze. Something inside me tightened. I tried to keep my voice steady. That is not a nice thing to say. You shouldn't talk that way to... Before I could finish, Isla's small hand shot up and struck my cheek. The sound cracked through the room like a whip. For a moment, everything stopped. I stared at her, stunned, my hand pressed to my face. Then Liam ran forward and kicked my shin hard enough to make me lose balance. I fell to the floor, my hip hitting the edge of the coffee table. The pain was sharp, but worse was the silence that followed. Then came laughter. Edward, still on the couch, didn't even stand up. He looked at me, then at them, and smirked. They're just kidding, Mom, he said casually. Don't be so sensitive. You know how kids are. I waited for him to get up, to discipline them, to do anything. But he turned back to the TV as if nothing had happened. Clara entered just then, holding shopping bags, and saw me sitting on the floor, my blouse soaked in the dirty water the twins had just thrown. Instead of shock or concern, she smiled an awful, cold smile. You deserve it, she said. Maybe next time you'll mind your tone with my kids. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room spun, the sound of laughter mixing with the ringing in my ears. My hands trembled as I tried to push myself up. No one helped. The twins were still giggling, proud of themselves. I remember thinking how strange it felt to be so humiliated in my own family's home. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. I went to my room without a word. I closed the door and pressed my back against it, my breath shaking. I could still hear their laughter through the walls. I touched my cheek where Isla's hand had landed. The skin burned. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, the lines around my mouth, the tired eyes. I had seen that face on so many patients during my years as a nurse. The look of someone who had survived too much and said too little. When Edward knocked on my door later that night, it wasn't to apologize. Mom, you need to relax, he said through the crack. They're just kids. Don't make a big deal out of it. Clara's stressed enough already. I didn't answer. He sighed. Good night. I sat at the small desk under the window, watching the dark yard outside. The moonlight fell across the photos I had brought with me. Edward as a boy, grinning with 2 missing teeth. The irony hit me hard. I had worked double shifts to feed that smile, to give him every chance in life. I had never let him go hungry, never let him feel unwanted. And now, I was the burden. The next morning, Clara acted as if nothing had happened. She hummed while making coffee, scrolled on her phone, and complained about traffic. The twins giggled as they recounted the incident like a comedy sketch. "Grandma's face looked so funny when she fell," Isla said, and they both laughed again. Edward smiled faintly, not even looking at me. I realized then that silence was my only protection in this house. Words would only feed their cruelty, so I went about my chores quietly, like a ghost moving through their perfect home. I made breakfast, drove the twins to school, scrubbed the floors until my knees ached, and smiled when Clara introduced me to her friends as our live-in helper. But that night, when the house finally went quiet, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my hands, wrinkled, tired, but steady. For the first time, I let myself whisper the truth out loud. This isn't love, this is servitude. And right there, under the dim light of my bedside lamp, I made a silent promise. I would not scream, I would not beg, I would not let their laughter define me. But they would remember me not as their maid, not as their victim, but as the woman who finally stood up. The next morning, the sun rose just like always. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't rage. I wasn't the type to scream or slam doors. What I felt was colder, quieter. Like the silence after a storm, when everything broken is just still. I got up before the others, boiled water for tea, and sat by the window as the sky turned soft orange. The twins would be leaving for their summer camp soon. Camp Lake Hill, some prestigious retreat 2 hours north, where they'd do canoeing, coding, and robotics, while the staff served organic lunches and no one raised their voices. They'd gone every summer for 3 years now. What no one in this house knew, what Clara had never asked, and Edward had never cared to remember, was that I was the one paying for it. $4,000 a year. $12,000 across 3 summers. I paid because I wanted Isla and Liam to grow up with opportunities, because I thought it would help them be better. Kinder, grateful. I was wrong. I remembered the first year I sent them. They were to give their children the best of everything. I remember smiling to myself, not because I wanted credit, but because I felt like I had done something right. But now, after the slap, the kick, the water, and the smirks, those memories felt hollow. After finishing my tea, I walked back to my room and opened the small metal lockbox I kept in the closet. Inside were bank statements, printed receipts, and the folder labeled Lake Hill Payment Info. I pulled out the contract, the one I had signed under my name, and stared at the numbers. $4,000 per child, prepaid in full, auto-renewed every April. My hands moved without hesitation. I opened my laptop, logged into the account, and canceled both tuition payments. It took less than 5 minutes. I clicked the confirmation button, then drafted a short email to the camp's director. Dear Miss Ellison, unfortunately, I will no longer be able to sponsor Isla and Liam Thompson for this summer's session. Please consider their spots available for waitlisted students. Best, Grace Thompson. No explanation, no excuses, just facts. If anyone ever asks me when I stopped being afraid of losing their approval, I'll say it was in that moment. That single click, that one email. Years of bending over backwards, of swallowing insults, of being invisible, all of it cracked apart quietly, like thin ice under a steady foot. I sat back in the chair and looked at the walls of my tiny guest room. Clara had painted them gray. Neutral is calming, she said. But all I ever felt in that room was small, forgotten. I touched the fresh bruise on my shin, still dark from where Liam had kicked me. And then I looked at the small framed photo on my nightstand, me and Edward, on his first day of kindergarten. I had made his little lunch by hand. He used to call me his hero. I don't know when I stopped being his hero. Maybe it was the day he met Clara. Maybe it was the day I said yes to moving in. Or maybe, truthfully, I was never his hero. I was just a lifeline he could cut once he learned how to swim. Later that afternoon, I stood in the laundry room folding their clothes. Isla's favorite pink hoodie, Liam's graphic t-shirts. I had washed and dried everything, as always. Clara came in halfway through and barely nodded. "Don't shrink the cotton. I paid good money for those," she said, then walked out without waiting for a reply. I didn't even blink. She had no idea what was coming, and for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel sad about that. I thought back to my years as a nurse, working double shifts to keep Edward safe, but never expecting I'd end up needing the same protection. But now, when I walked through those rooms, I felt like a servant. An intruder. Someone to be tolerated, but never thanked. That night, Edward came home late. I was in the kitchen pouring tea when he wandered in and grabbed a beer. "Hey, Mom," he said casually. "Clara's sending the twins' stuff to camp next weekend. I think the van picks them up from the mall on Saturday." He didn't look at me. He didn't say thank you. He just assumed it was done. I sipped my tea. "You might want to check with the camp," I said quietly. "There's been a change." He paused mid-drink. "What change?" "I won't be paying for it this year." He blinked. "Wait, what?" I didn't repeat myself. I turned, rinsed my cup, and left him standing there. The next day, Clara came storming into my room, holding her phone. "What the hell did you do?" she snapped. "The camp said the payments were canceled. They said we lost the spots." I met her gaze calmly. "Yes," I said, "I canceled them." Her face turned red. "You had no right." "I had every right," I interrupted. "It was my money, my choice. And after what happened in this house, I don't owe anyone an explanation." She stared at me like I had grown a second head. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to get in there? Those camps have wait lists." I shrugged. "Then perhaps next year you can apply yourself. I'm sure you and Edward can figure it out." Her jaw clenched. "You're just doing this to punish us." "No," I said, my voice level. "I'm doing this because sometimes silence enables cruelty. I've been quiet for too long. That ends now." She slammed the door behind her when she left. Later that evening, after the twins had thrown another tantrum over screen time and Clara locked herself in the bathroom, I made myself another cup of tea and stepped out onto the back porch. The yard stretched out before me, quiet and bathed in the orange hue of dusk. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not because I had hurt them, but because I had finally stood up for myself. I didn't need a parade. I didn't need gratitude, but I needed to reclaim my worth. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, a letter arrived, a gray morning in early June when the air still held the chill of spring. I was folding towels in the laundry room when a white envelope landed on the welcome mat with a thud. I recognized the bold logo at once. Camp Horizon Lakeside. My heart fluttered, though I did not know why. After all, the twins had attended that camp the past 3 summers, and the payment had always gone through without question, until now. I carried the envelope into the kitchen and set it on the counter. Clara breezed in, phone in hand, scrolling. "What is it, Mom?" she asked without looking up. Her voice was cool, casual, but I heard the edge in it. "Mail from camp again?" She shrugged and placed her latte on the island. "I'll deal with it." But I could not let it go. I opened the envelope as she stepped out for a call. Inside was a letter stamped urgent in red, along with a typed notice saying, "Please be advised that the sponsorship arrangement for Isla Thompson and Liam Thompson is no longer active. If payment is not received by June 15, your children's enrollment will be forfeited." I froze, read the sentence again. My hand closed around the tissue I had been using to pat dry the towels. The name their name was mine. I paid that sponsorship. I did. For 3 years. $8,000. $12,000. Even more. I had done it quietly, without expectation of acknowledgement. I thought love was service, and nothing more. Isla burst into the kitchen then, mid-scream. "Not going to camp, because of you, Grandma." Her voice pitched high, and she slammed the letter onto the table. Liam came behind her, his face flushed. "You canceled it. You ruined everything, he shouted. Clara walked in, stepped over the envelope casually, and flicked her hair. Yes, thanks to you, she said, nodding at me. Because you just cannot keep your mouth shut, can you? Edward followed, hands in his pockets, his stare cold. Mom, he began, what did you do? You knew the camp fees were due. You knew this family counted on those spots. You just let them go. He stepped closer. You're being selfish, undermining our plans. I set the tissue down, wiped my hands. My voice was soft, but firm. I am not your ATM machine. I am not your service provider. I am your mother, your grandmother, but you never treated me like that. I paused. Clara snorted. You're old. What else can you say? She shot. Still lecturing after all these years. Liam's voice cracked. We were going. Mom even promised we'd go water skiing and robotics challenge. Isla wiped a tear from her cheek, looking more angry than sad. It was awful to witness. But the worst part was the way Edward turned away, clenched his jaw. Clara crossed her arms. Maybe someone taught you boundaries, Grandma, but you never learned respect. The words cut sharper than Liam's kick, sharper than Isla's slap. For the first time, I felt something truly new in that house. Not pity, not resentment, but real clarity. I left the kitchen, took a slow step into the living room, sat on the end of the sofa that Edward never used, and watched them as they argued. The room echoed with their voices, but I felt nothing inside. The feeling had slipped away. All I felt was quiet. I remembered decades earlier, when I did teach boundaries. When I was a young nurse, working shifts at the hospital, coming home to a toddler Edward in his pajamas, clutching a teddy bear. I tucked him in and told him, "You're safe with me. I'll always come back." And I did. Through sickness, through sleepless nights, I always came back. That same woman now sat here looking at her family and wondering when her presence became so disposable. Clara had always been fond of posting pictures of the twins, thankful hashtags, blessed captions. Edward would smile and nod. I never said anything. I rewrote a recipe here, helped fix a leak there. I made brownies for the bake sale, chaperoned every field trip, and yet now it seemed that my kindness had been spent and forgotten. When Edward pounded his fist on the coffee table and shouted, "You know what, Mom? Don't help us anymore." I looked around the room and saw guests shifting uncomfortably, children peeking. I stood. My spine felt straight for the first time in months. "Very well," I said, voice calm. "Then I will help myself." I walked into the hallway past family photographs, my wedding picture, Edward's first day of school, the twins in matching camp shirts from last year. I paused by the staircase where the kick had landed. The bruise had faded, but the memory stayed. I picked up a framed photo of Edward and me at his college graduation. The tassel was mid-swing, his grin wide. I'd sewn his jacket, ironed his gown, wiped his sweat. I touched the frame, then carried on to my room. I sat on the bed, took a deep breath, and stared out the window at the yard. It felt foreign. I thought of Emma, my daughter, so many miles away, always calling me every Sunday. Always asking how I was, always sounding well, sounding like I mattered. I closed my eyes and allowed myself a small smile. I got up, poured another cup of tea, and returned to the living room. They had quieted down. The envelope lay on the table. I picked it up and set it on the sofa. No one looked at me. That's fine. I didn't need them to. It was enough that I knew. Later that night, Clara was on the phone, whining about how much this will cost now, and we have to scramble for other options. Edward sat beside her, face hollow, staring at the screen. Their power looked like vulnerability. I poured another cup of tea, switched off the kitchen light, and retreated to my room. As I slid under the covers, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. Not the kind that comes with shouting, but the quiet kind that comes when you stop pretending you belong somewhere you do not. My body ached, my hip still tender from the kick, but my heart felt lighter. That day, the storm arrived at our doorstep, but I did not open the door. I sat behind it, and I waited for what would come next. I arrived at the attorney's office on a Thursday morning, the air outside crisp with late autumn chill. I pushed open the door of the old law firm musty carpet, polished mahogany panels, the same place where I had once signed papers with Walter, my husband, 2 decades ago. I wasn't nervous. I was calm. My heart no longer fluttered when I thought of Edward, Clara, or the twins. It had steadied into something firm. I sat across from Miss Jackson, the lawyer who had handled 1,000 estate cases. The desk between us carried a green banker's lamp and a stack of file folders. I placed my purse gently on the floor and met her eyes. "Thank you for seeing me," I began. "I would like to amend my will." She raised an eyebrow, and I knew she'd sensed the current of change in me. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson, what would you like to amend?" I told her. "I hereby revise the estate disposition so that the house at Cedar Ridge, the retirement fund in account 45210A, the shares in Thompson Supply, and the life insurance policy on my husband's name be transferred to my daughter Emma of Portland, Oregon, effective immediately upon my signature." Her fingers tapped lightly across the pad. "That is a considerable shift. Are you certain?" I nodded. She offered a small cup of coffee. I declined. "Yes," I said, "I am certain." As she prepared the new documents, I thought of Edward sitting on the couch that day in the living room, his remote in hand, watching their football game as his children slapped and kicked me and his wife cackled like it was a game show. I remembered the bruise on my cheek, the dampness of my blouse after the water hit it, the look in Edward's eyes, a flicker of amusement. I did not want revenge. Revenge is loud. I wanted justice, quiet, solid, unshakable. My change of will was not a declaration of war. It was a statement of value. My value. While Miss Jackson typed, I opened my tote and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was the typed letter, my letter of direction. I pushed it toward her. She glanced at it, recognized the heading. It said simply, "To be opened upon estate administration." She asked if I wanted to read it aloud. I said no. She folded it into the file. "Mrs. Thompson," she said, "once we file these, your estate will reflect your wishes. Edward will no longer be the primary beneficiary." I nodded. On the drive home, I felt light not because of what I was gaining, but because of what I was releasing. The house on Cedar Ridge had echoed with my footsteps for years, but I had never felt at home there. It had been my workplace, my caretaker's dungeon, my ghost town. Now I felt it become the start of something else, someone else's journey. It could be Emma's, or someone new altogether. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Love is not a duty, nor is it a privilege for the ungrateful." Those words would sit in my file next to the letter for the day when they would open it and read them. When Clara called later, full of panic, I listened calmly. "You changed your mind?" she hissed. I explained, "I changed my wishes." Edward called me too, voice tight. "Mom, we need to talk. You're ruining our family." I sighed. "No," I said, "I am restoring it." They didn't understand. In the silence of that evening, I prepared tea and sat in the window seat of my spare room. The moon-sweet glow lit the Cheshire expression on the twins' faces in framed photos. Isla giggling, Liam holding a trophy from last year's robotics challenge, both photos sponsored by me. I placed a hand over each photo and thought, no more hidden payments, no more invisible supporting roles. I slept better that night, though my body ached with age. The storm I had felt lurking finally shifted. It did not roar, it settled. In the morning, the law firm sent confirmation, amendment to will, recorded the 15th of November, 2025. I saved the PDF. I went on with my chores, folded the blankets, raked leaves, made soup, but something was different. I felt upright. And somewhere far away, in Portland, Emma and Henry toasted a new chapter, to Mom and to new beginnings. I closed my eyes, inhaled the scent of the herbal tea I'd brewed, and smiled quietly, because a woman who had been ignored for years had finally claimed her story, and with it, her peace. I arrived at the door of Emma's house late one afternoon in November, the leaves crunching beneath my sneakers. I had packed my few suitcases earlier that morning, while the twins shouted insults through the closed door, and Edward looked away, his face drained of recognition. When I slid his old house key into the little envelope, clutched in my hand, I wrote a short note. I checked out. Please forward any mail addressed to me. I did not fold it. I placed it on the kitchen counter and left without a backward glance. At the time, Clara and her friends were in the living room, sipping sparkling wine and laughing about their upcoming New Year's party. I overheard one of them whisper, "She's ancient and still acts like she owns the place." The words stung only because I once felt I did own that place, owned it by love, by years of Sunday dinners, by wiping tiny arms and patching scraped knees. But owning by loyalty is different from owning by respect. I drove out of Knoxville, radio low, the scent of pine and cold air filling the car. When I pulled into Emma's driveway in Portland, Tennessee, the house was warm, a scent of bread baking, cinnamon, the hum of laughter. Henry, my son-in-law, came out with 2 mugs of hot chocolate in hand. "Mom," he said, with his kind eyes, "you don't have to lift a finger. This house is yours now." He reached out and kissed my hand. The gesture made me blink. I thought, so this is what family feels like. Inside, Emma hugged me twice, as though I was both the daughter she never lost and the mother she always had. "Welcome home," she whispered. I looked around. The living room softly lit, photos of grandkids, a stack of board games, and best of all, no remotes blaring, no cast iron rules about meals, no eyes that watched me clean, then turned away. That night, Isla and Liam's voices still echoed in my mind. "Get out, greedy old lady." They imagined triumph. I realized how much I had given so they could call me names without consequence. And I realized how much I could walk away and still keep my dignity intact. As I settled into the guest room they had made for me, Henry placed fresh flowers on the nightstand and a little note that read, "For our queen of quiet strength." I brushed my fingers across the petals and thought, I am not their servant. I am someone worth being served. When Emma served breakfast the next morning, fresh cinnamon rolls, thick fruit-filled jam, I smiled. I began to taste home again. I did not call Edward or Clara that morning. I let them write the first words. I poured coffee and sipped slowly, realizing my life had changed in one night, not with a shout, but with a shift. As winter approached, I watched from the front porch as snow drifted across the yard. I thought of Edward's house, his football games, his commentary, his mother's role as a jest. I did not miss the shouting. I did not miss the tension. I missed the years I had wasted believing I was invisible and impotent. But that version of me is gone. In Portland, I gardened small rosemary bushes, lavender for the bees, a bench where I would sit and read. I walked the dog with Henry on weekends. I baked homemade bread with Emma. And sometimes, just sometimes, I hugged the grandchildren and let their laughter wrap around me. It was not perfect, but it was real. It was safe. When Clara texted me months later, "Thanks for screwing my holiday budget," I didn't reply. I deleted it. I had no need to justify myself to someone who could not see me. As my first winter in the new home landed, I wrote in my journal, "Protecting yourself is not betrayal, it is survival." And I meant it. That night, I looked around the room full of warmth and blankets and gentle voices. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I was home. A few weeks into my new life, I got a text message, one of the first that came from Knoxville. "Your name was removed from the will. Check with the attorney if you want full details." I didn't reply. I folded the message and set it aside. I had already washed the teacup I had been holding, wiped the last drip off the counter, and walked outside onto the porch at Emma's house, the late afternoon sun warm on the wood. The air smelled of pine and cinnamon from the kitchen. I closed my eyes and let everything else, their laugh, their insults, their entitlement, fall away. When Edward called days later, his voice cracked. "Mom, this is ridiculous. I just got word from Jackson and Miller. You are no longer the primary beneficiary. Everything is now designated to Emma. The house, the retirement fund, everything." He paused. "We can talk about this, right? There must be some mistake." I listened calmly. I did not gasp, did not swear. I said, softly, "I made my decision a while ago, Edward. I expect you'll get a letter soon." He shouted, "You can't do this to us. You're supposed to be the mother who supports her children." I closed the phone. I looked out at the evergreen branch that brushed the porch as a breeze passed. I thought, I was never just the mother who supports. I was the mother who learned to love, and now I was the mother who set boundaries. I leaned back and allowed the world to settle. Clara called soon after, furious, panting. You witch," she snarled. "You turned your back on your family." I smiled and drank the cold coffee she left on voicemail. "I didn't turn my back," I said quietly. "I stopped carrying people who kicked me when I was standing." She screamed curses and hung up. Meanwhile, in Knoxville, the twins were told they could not attend Camp Horizon Lakeside that summer because the sponsorship arrangement had lapsed. Isla texted me, "Thanks for ruining my life, you greedy granny." Liam said something worse. A group of their classmates had already joined other camps and posted pictures. The twins stood out now with camp cancel labels. Their friends asked, "Your grandma pays for your camp, and now she canceled it?" The sting of ridicule grew. When the parents tried to explain, the word entitled floated in the air over the dinner table. I received no call from them to comfort the kids. There was no apology. I continued with my work, listening to my daughter's laughter in the kitchen, watching the dog chase snowflakes, folding blankets on Sunday afternoon. One afternoon, I found a small envelope slipped under the welcome mat at Emma's house. It was from Edward. It read, "I want to talk when you're ready." I put it inside a drawer. Perhaps I will talk when I feel ready. Perhaps not. I had learned, people who disrespect you do not deserve your explanation, they deserve your silence. I walked into the living room and found a board game spread on the table. My youngest grandchild, age 6, waited with a grin. "Grandma, your move." I placed the tile and laughed softly. It was easy, because I wasn't playing for their approval anymore. That night, I sat on the porch steps after dinner and watched the stars appear. The wood of the steps was cold under my bare feet. I thought of the years I had given early mornings, late nights, missed vacations, babysitting, cooking, laundering, chauffeuring. I thought of the bruise on my hip, the wet blouse, the laughter in the living room that I used to interpret as love. And I let it go. Because the real change was not about them losing, it was about me winning myself back. I did not get angry when the letter came telling Edward the estate was executed according to my new will. I simply folded it and placed it in my file. In the calm I felt, there was no gloating, there was no sharp edge of triumph, there was only a quiet certainty. I matter, respect matters. And when you walk away, you walk into yourself. I looked at the photo on the mantel, Emma hugging me with her kids beneath the apple tree in Oregon 2 months ago. I touched the frame and whispered, "Thank you." The phone blinked. It was a text from Clara. "You'll regret this." I didn't look. I poured tea. I put on my coat. I stepped outside into the falling snow and inhaled. I thought, I will not be cold anymore, not inside. The house was filled with the smell of rosemary and baking bread. I could hear Henry humming as he prepared soup. I walked through the kitchen and found Emma kneading dough. She looked up, smiled, and said, "I'm glad you're here." I said nothing. I didn't need to. I had found a place where I was not an extra in someone else's story. I was the lead. And in that moment, I realized the storm of their contempt had passed. The damage they inflicted was real, yet their moment of power had ended. Respect cannot be built on one-sided giving. It doesn't stand. So I gave differently. I gave where it mattered, where I was valued. The twins would learn, maybe not this summer, maybe not ever, but the next time someone looks at them and asks, "Who helped you?" the answer will not be just, "Grandma paid for camp." The answer will be, "Grandma let us go." And maybe that will mean more than any canoe trip ever could. And so I settled into my new life, not vindictive, just free, not bitter, just certain. The phone rang again. I ignored it. My tea was still warm. The wind shook a few pine needles. My story was no longer about what they did to me, it was about what I did for myself. The morning the letter arrived was quiet enough that I heard the postman's footsteps on the porch before I opened the door. Minnesota sunshine, bright, clean, even in September, fell through the window as I accepted the thin envelope. I did not recognize the handwriting at first. Then the words came into focus, shaky but real. Dear Grandma Grace. The envelope itself looked like it had been folded and refolded many times, the edges softened and creased with use. I carried it back to my chair in the sunroom, where the lavender plants outside winked gold in the light. I slipped my reading glasses on, placed the envelope on my lap, and broke the seal. Inside were 2 items, a folded piece of notebook paper and a small drawing taped onto the back of the paper. The letter, written in blue ink with uneven letters, read, Grandma, I am sorry for hitting you and for kicking you. I am sorry for calling you a witch and for saying you were nothing. I was wrong. I liked going to camp. I liked your cooking and your stories. I miss you. Will you still be my grandma? Love, Isla. Below the lines I could see a simple signature, Isla T. I didn't read ahead. I paused. My throat tightened. The admission of guilt sprawled across the page like a bridge I'd almost stopped believing they could walk across. I folded the note and picked up the drawing. The scene was joyous. 2 stick figures, one labeled Grandma and one labeled Isla, standing in a field of daisies beneath a sun with rays. Underneath, someone had written, You are the one I love. I let the drawing fall open on the arm of the chair and closed my eyes. For years, I had waited not for thanks, not for parades, but for one sign, that someone I gave to saw me, that someone I loved back. That moment might have come. I felt tears gather, not tears of pain this time, but something different. Soft, warm, cautious. I put the letter and drawing aside and sat quietly. My mind visited memories. Isla's wet cheek after the slap, Liam's laughter as he kicked, the couch and the TV, the house I called home but never recognized me. The bruise on my hip where the kick landed, the dirty water seeping into my skirt, the smirk on Edward's face when he told me to just accept it, the cold smile of Clara saying, I deserved it. All of it, everything sat on the shelf now, not forgotten, but paused. I looked out of the window, and the lavender bushes swayed gently in the breeze. I took a deep breath. I was older. For a long time, I believed age made me invisible. Today, I believed age made me deliberate. I dragged myself up and went to the kitchen, the letter in hand. Emma was there, kneading dough at the table. She paused when she saw me. Mom? She asked softly. I got mail, I said. I held the envelope out. She wiped her hands on the dish towel and came over. She reached for the letter and then the drawing. She read, and I could see the surprise first, then something else. Relief. She stood quietly beside me, neither of us saying a word. Finally, she said, I think she's really trying. I nodded. A lump rose in my throat. That evening, at dinner, I placed the letter and drawing on the table. Henry, Emma's husband, read them too. He looked at me and said, She'll come around. I nodded again. Graceful, simple. I did not demand more. I did not hurry forgiveness. I merely let the moment stay. Later, when the dishes were cleared and the house turned quiet, I sat on the porch again. The crickets sang, the stars came out. I held the drawing in my lap. Isla's stick figure grandma looked big in the field. I smiled. For the first time, I no longer saw my reflection in the old house. I saw the person I chose to be. I did not drive back to Knoxville. I did not text Edward or Clara. I did not message Liam. I was not ready. Not yet. Some stones take weeks to settle. But I slept peacefully, and when I woke, I made a small decision. I would send Isla a reply, not one full of blame, but one full of hope. In the note I wrote, Your place is here. When you are ready, I will be too. I signed it Love, Grandma Grace. I mailed it the next morning. I watched from the window when the mailman stopped at the twins' house. I wondered if Isla would read it and pause. Perhaps she will, or perhaps she won't. That did not matter. What mattered was that I offered the bridge. I extended my hand. Days later, I received a photograph via text, Isla in camp, but paired with a different sponsor. Smiling. She captioned it, Thanks, Grandma. I found it. My heart fluttered, not with triumph, but with softness. Sometimes I think the hurt is the loudest when it ends quietly. Sometimes the healing is the loudest when it begins with a soft whisper. And I sat on the porch with the breeze in my hair, sipping my tea, watching the lavender glow gold in the afternoon sun, knowing I did not need them to believe me any longer. I just needed one of them to see me. And in that seeing, I found myself again. The holiday lights in Emma and Henry's house glowed softly, warm bulbs strung around the doorway, a wreath freshly placed on the front door, the living room mantel stacked with stockings and photos of past Christmases. I arrived just after dusk, the winter sky deepening into indigo as I stepped through the threshold. Henry greeted me with a hug and said, "Mom, you're home." Emma's eyes held tears, and I understood that this was more than a dinner. It was a reckoning. Weeks earlier, she had sent the invitation to Edward and Clara and the twins. It said simply, "You are invited. If you come to give and receive respect." When Edward asked what the condition was, Emma replied, "If you come to apologize, I will welcome you. If you come to demand, you can stay home." I had taken that as my answer. I packed a small box of cinnamon rolls and a quiet willingness to forgive, but I did not bring my old role of caretaker. As I stepped inside, the scent of roast turkey, hazelnut stuffing, and cranberry mingled with the soft hum of a string quartet in the background. I hung my coat on the rack and paused, turning to the room. Clara and Edward entered behind me, Liam and Isla at their sides. The twins looked uneasy, like deer on glass. The older one, Isla, clenched a small stuffed bear and glanced at me from under her lashes. Liam shuffled his feet, avoiding eye contact. I smiled gently. "Welcome," I said. The twins froze. Edward forced a nod. Clara kept a mask of polite composure. Henry came to my side and took my hand. "This is your evening, Mom," he whispered. I squeezed his fingers. Minutes later, we gathered around the table. The centerpiece was a rosemary garland interwoven with tiny silver bells, and the plates were simple white porcelain, no ostentation, only warmth. Emma handed me a glass of sparkling apple cider, and Henry raised a toast. To family, to home, and to new beginnings. I lifted my glass and quietened. I looked at Edward. His face held the history of every Sunday dinner I prepared and every casserole I brought. His eyes glistened. I said softly, "I am not the one you have to fear. I only hope to be seen." The room flickered in the candlelight. It was not dramatic, but it was enough. Isla cleared her throat, voice trembling. "Grandma, I'm sorry." She did not look up when the words came. Liam echoed, "Yeah, me too." Their hands found each other under the table. Clara's eyes widened. Edward's lips parted. I nodded. "Thank you," I said quietly. "That means everything to me." Then I looked at Edward. "You don't need to say more. You just need to mean it." He choked and sat down. There was no scolding, no sermon. We ate the meal, but the mood was changed lighter, quieter, full of possibilities instead of demands. Later, after dessert, when the twins had gone to unwrap their gifts and Clara stepped outside to take a call, Edward remained. He stayed by the fireplace as the fire crackled and popped. I turned toward him. "You know," I said, "I remember making your favorite pie when you were 10. You told me it was the best in the world." His eyes flickered. "I remember," he whispered. "Mom, I'm sorry for not remembering you." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I forgive you," I said, not because he begged, but because he listened. The day ended in the quietest way. We stood under the porch lights, gloves on, boots on, as snow started to fall softly. I looked at the house, the car headlights in the driveway, the returning laughter from inside, and thought, this is home. I realized that the house I lived in with Edward and Clara had never been mine. This house, with Emma and Henry, was the first one I felt belonged to me. When I returned to sleep in my guest room that night, I closed the door and leaned against it. I thought of the twins. Isla now sleeping under a blanket I had made for her. Liam smiling at a camp he will get to go to next year if he chooses. Edward in his own bed with tears on his pillow. Clara is upstairs, quietly unpacking Christmas gifts. They are not perfect. We are not perfect. But we are real. In bed, I scribbled in my journal. Respect is the greatest gift. It needs no wrapping. I thought of the moment Isla whispered, "I'm sorry," and how heavy that moment had been, and how light it became when everyone else exhaled. I thought of the journey from that slap and kick to this moment. It was long, it hurt, and it was worth it. When the morning came, I joined Emma in the kitchen while Henry stacked logs in the fireplace. The twins emerged, blinking, still in pajamas. Isla wrapped her arms around me and said, "Grandma, can we make cookies today?" I nodded. That one small request filled a year's worth of hurt. I saw my value, not in how much I gave, but in how gently I could be asked. On my drive home later, I passed my old neighborhood. The house looked the same, but everything in me had changed. I no longer crouched to clean someone else's spilled juice. I no longer waited in the corner to be noticed. I carried someone else's cinnamon rolls this time, and someone else's "you are seen" in their eyes. I am older, wiser, and loved. Not for what I did, but because I stood steady and demanded dignity. If you feel stories like this matter when someone who has been invisible becomes visible, please remember one thing. You are worth more than your past assignments. You are worth the seat at the table. You are worth the respect, and you are worth being home. The lights twinkled outside as I pulled away. I leaned on the dashboard, the soft hum of the engine and the falling snow accompanying me. I said goodbye not to them, but to the version of me who was always on duty. I was free. I was whole. I was at peace. And on that winter night, as the snow gathered on the windshield, I whispered, "May the people we love learn to see us. May those who hurt us wake up to their own reflection. And may we always arrive home." Thank you for listening to Grace's story, a journey of pain, strength, and quiet redemption. If this touched your heart, reminded you of someone you love, or helped you feel seen, you're not alone. At Grandma True Stories, we believe every voice matters, especially the ones that have been silenced too long. So if you believe in standing up for dignity, in healing through love, and in giving voice to the unheard, hit that subscribe button. Stay with us, because more stories like this are waiting to be told. You deserve to be here. You deserve to be heard. See you in the next story.